Hey there everybody, this is Dejong-Stothoff with All Phase Landscaping and Design, here to talk to you a little bit on how to build a segmental retaining wall. These pictures are of a customer of ours' backyard, and as you can see, this is the backside of their property line, which is a hill, and their goal is to build up that hill into level ground using a segmental retaining wall so they can maximize the space of their backyard within their property line. So that's what we're going to discuss today, and if you have any questions, feel free to email me at dane@americantradesecrets.com. You'll find our info at the end of this video. So we've surveyed and pinpointed the location of our retaining wall, and now we are in the excavation process of this build. In this build we chose a 8,000 pound mini excavator. We're using a 1.5 foot claw bucket to dig out the earth with. If you watch, we are taking the soil and dispersing it on the outside of where the retaining wall will be. Down in that channel there's actually a creek, and so this soil being placed on the opposite side of the retaining wall will work as a diversion berm to keep the water away from this retaining wall. Make sure before you guys start excavating that you contact your local authorities to see who's responsible for utility location. You may have to call all the utilities individually yourself and have them come out and spray, but in this example we are excavating in Oregon, so we called 811, which is a hotline that basically dispatched all the utility providers in this area. Then they came out and sprayed for all of their utilities and marked them with some paint, and then gave us the clearance to go ahead and start excavating once all of the utilities are located. You want to do this for your own protection and for theirs as well, but just make sure to get it cleared before digging. It will help for insurance purposes if something goes wrong, but also, I mean, you're gonna not have the headache of hitting something if you make this preventative measure. When you guys are excavating using heavy equipment, make sure to adjust your positioning so you can get the safest use of the equipment. Soil itself is very heavy, and when you introduce water, it gets even worse. So a good way to keep yourself safe is just to keep repositioning yourself and make sure you're on the most stable level ground for your dig out. So during our excavation for this retaining wall, we're trying to keep the backside of this hill as flat as possible. So after we build the retaining wall and we're backfilling the wall itself with drainage rock, that rock will sit down into a flat pocket, which will help with the weight distribution of the rock itself. When you guys are excavating this close to an edge, make sure that the soil can hold the weight of the machinery that you're choosing to use for excavation. We're building this project during the dead of summertime, so the soil itself is very strong and there's no water in it to make it unstable. But had we been doing this during the dead of wintertime, we might not have been able to excavate it from the top like this because the ground would have been too unstable with water in it, and we could have either slid down that trench or the side of the hill would have caved in and we would have fallen into the trench that way as well. So just exercise caution when you're digging that close to an edge. Once most of the excavation is done with the machinery, go through it and dig out the rest by hand. Once the job site is as clean as possible and your excavation looks as clean as you can get it, that's when you're going to start the next phase of the project, and that is building. So if you look at our excavation, we have achieved that L shape that we were talking about. In this shot, it's a backwards L. So the hillside is as upright as we can get it, and the bottom of the trench is flat. So this has created a nice pocket for our base rock to sit in, and when we backfill that retaining wall, it creates a nice pocket for that rock to sit into, and it's great for weight distribution of the rock when it's flat and upright like that. Now that the excavation is complete, we are going to install some geotextile land fabric down into the base of the trench. Geotextile land fabric is a stabilizer cloth that is a woven fabric, and this will stabilize the rock and not allow it to dissipate into the soil over time naturally. Take your fabric, stretch it all the way across your trench, and then what you'll want to do is line it up and get it into a position where you either cut it or install it. In this example, it's a lot wider than we need it, so we're going to paper bag it out, drop it into the trench, and cut it. There's not a lot of room in this backyard to stretch out this fabric, and so we're pulling it down into this trench so we can figure out where exactly we're going to make our cut at. But unfortunately, the dang thing actually fell into the trench altogether. But that's alright. If you watch my work partner, he's going to go grab something heavy and we're going to pin it up, and then we're going to stretch it back out into the trench, and we're going to find our cut mark. When you're ready to cut, use a pair of sharp scissors to cut this stuff. That's what tool I found works the best. If you watch me, I'm literally just pulling it and those scissors are just shearing right through it. Using a box cutter, it's just a little more dangerous, and it doesn't tend to work that well. But if you watch how quickly I'm just carving through this material with these scissors, that's why I recommend to use them. When you have the proper width of the geotextile land fabric cut, then now you're going to install it into the trench. And so you're going to stretch it out, remove all creases and bends, and you're going to get it prepared to dump your rock onto it. If it's a windy day, you might consider stapling it down with some landscaping staples or small nails, but we didn't really have to because it wasn't a windy day in this, and we just want to make sure that it's laid out correctly and then bury it with rock, because the rock itself is going to pin it down. if you have a little bit extra material widthwise, just fold it over like we did in this shot right here. A little bit extra material, it's not going to hurt anything, and it saves you time from having to cut that off. So just fold it over and just bury it with rock. Once you guys have installed your geotextile land fabric into your base trench, now you need to install the geotextile filter fabric along the backside of your trench. This filter fabric will keep the land and the drainage rock separated, and it will allow water to pass through the fabric and enter into your drainage rock. But it will keep the drainage rock clean by not allowing soil to enter and mix in with the drainage rock. If you allow soil to enter into that drainage rock, then eventually over time it's going to plug. So the reason we put this filter fabric along the backside of the trench is to always keep that drainage rock clean. When installing these fabrics, make sure as best as possible to install all the square footage needed in one large piece. If you guys can't cover all square footage needed with one large piece, then you're going to need to cut and overlap those pieces. I would overlap a minimum of 1 foot, and you're going to need to secure those overlaps with landscaping staples to make sure that they're nice and secure and aren't going to move. To install the geotextile filter fabric, you're going to stretch out the fabric along your trench and drop in one side of the filter fabric over the back side of the trench onto the geotextile land fabric below. You're going to overlap the two fabrics about 1 foot, and you need to make sure that there's no open space in between the two fabrics. Now that you guys have laid out your geotextile filter fabric along the backside of the trench, walk along the edges and make sure that everything is overlapped just right, and get ready to install your base rock. This is what your geotextile land fabric and your geotextile filter fabric should look like when installed together in preparation for your retaining wall base. For base material, we are using 3/4 minus crushed rock, 0 with fines. When you guys are moving heavy material into your workspace using machines like this skid steer loader, Consider using protective equipment such as protective driveway mats to minimize the damage that these machines can cause when you're moving such heavy material. Use your equipment or other methods to bring in your base material and fill up that trench by putting your base rock on the geotextile land fabric below. As you fill up your trench with base rock, you need to take a landscape grading rake and rake out that gravel and grade it nice and evenly as you distribute it amongst the trench. The reason you're grading this gravel is because every 3 to 4 inches you're going to be compacting this gravel as you build your base up. And so if that rock isn't graded, you're going to run that compactor over it and it's going to have these large dips and bumps everywhere. And so before you run the compactor over the gravel, you want to grade that gravel as flat and as even as possible, so by the time that you run that compactor over it, you have a nice flat surface to build on. When you feel that you've graded the gravel enough, fire up your compactor and compact the gravel. You're going to walk back and forth with this compactor over this gravel a few times. If you can, have somebody spray the gravel in front of you with some water. This will help the gravel settle down and compact a little bit better than if it was just dry. You don't want to flood it with water, but you do want to introduce a little bit of water for the best compaction rate. Take your time with the compacting process and go over that rock a few different times. You want to make sure that that rock is as packed as you can possibly get it, and so it's going to require several passes over it until it's literally hard as a rock. Continue to bring in your material, grading your gravel, and compacting every 3 to 4 inches until your base is about 1 foot. This is what your base should look like before installing your foundation row using segmental retaining wall blocks. Use your equipment to move the segmental retaining wall blocks into place to start building your foundation row. You want to line them up one by one so you can easily grab them and install them as you go, without having to get up and move around a lot to grab each one. As you guys are building your foundation row, have a little bit of base rock next to you guys so you can add some gravel into the base where you need it. So as you build the foundation row across your base, you're going to find that the base is either a little bit too high or a little bit too low. So if you're a little bit too low, just add a little bit of base rock to the low spots. Then you're going to grade it with a hard rake and make sure that it's as flat as possible before you install your next segmental wall block. If you guys do end up adding rock to your base, like we are in the film, don't worry about that fresh rock not being compacted, because as you guys are building your foundation row, the block itself will end up compacting the rock underneath. So don't worry about that. The fact that you've already compacted your base as you built it up means that the base itself is compacted, and so the little bit of gravel that you're adding to it, don't stress about that not being compacted, because it will end up becoming compacted into your base with the installation of the block itself. Another thing to keep in mind when you're adding rock to your base for the block installation is make sure that you aren't just adding rock where those blocks are going to go, but add behind and in front of the blocks as well, to make sure that the whole surface area is covered proportionally. When your base gravel is at the proper elevation, now you're ready to install a retaining wall block. Grab your block and place it on the base. If you already have a previously installed block, make sure that this next one that you're putting down, it lines up with the previous one perfectly. You're going to want to then take either your hand or a tool, and you're going to want to adjust the gravel to where the block itself fits level frontways and sideways. When your retaining wall block is on your base, you're going to need to use a 2-foot level, and you're going to need to keep checking it and make adjustments to your base. All this is going to be done by hand, using your level as a guide for the block itself. The goal is to make sure that before you hand mallet this block down into that gravel, it's as level as you can get it. Once it's level, frontways and sideways, that's when you're going to take your rubber mallet and you're going to embed that block down into your gravel base, as demonstrated. As you continue to install each block, you're going to go through this process a lot. You're going to add gravel, you're going to put the block back down, hit it with the mallet, compact that block, checking it with your level, making adjustments where needed, until the block itself is level, not only individually, sideways and frontways, but also level with the previous blocks that are installed. If you guys notice there's lips on the back of these retaining wall blocks, you can use a hammer and bust those lips off and it will make that block a little bit easier to install. But I personally like to keep those lips intact and embed them down into the base gravel. I think that this adds to the strength of the foundation course. And so it's a personal preference, but that's what I personally like to do. If you check with your retaining wall block manufacturer, some manufacturers do have an option for base course blocks themselves that are manufactured without the lips. So what was happening was contractors would go to bust these lips off and they would actually break their bricks into pieces doing that. And so manufacturers started to create bricks without those lips because some people do like the ease of installing them without those lips. So if that's a concern for you guys, make sure to check with the brick manufacturer and find out if they have an option for you. One thing with retaining walls, that first course, this is what takes most of the time. If you get this first course wrong, then the entire wall is going to be compromised. So that's why the first course always takes the longest, because each individual brick has to be precise, and on top of it, each brick needs to be precise with the one previous. And so it's not just installing one block, it's making sure that they're all level with each other, which is why if you look on the screen, we're using a 4-foot level to check how straight it is with the blocks before it. So we have to level one block that's in the front, and once that's level, we have to make sure that it is straight and in line with the previous ones. Then you have to make adjustments according to what you find out. So that's why this takes so long to build that first course. Not all retaining wall blocks are the same. Some are hollow, some aren't. This particular block is hollow, and so now that we've installed that block where we need to have it, we're going to fill in that hollow space with 3/4 minus crushed rock, which is our base rock. Once it's filled, then we're going to take the end of a shovel and we're going to actually pack that rock as best we can, and then we're going to add a little bit more to it until that block is completely full of gravel. Once it's full of gravel, that's when that one block is officially installed. Once your retaining wall block is completely full of gravel, grab a broom and sweep off the top of the brick. This will help keep your bricks nice and clean, and after that's completed, now you're ready to install the next one. When you're installing a foundation row for a retaining wall, be prepared to be on your knees for an extended long period of time. You're going to be making adjustments to these bricks all the time. And so I recommend laying a knee pad down or some kind of floor mat to protect your knees from driving into the gravel below. If you lay some protective mats down underneath you, that's going to protect your knees from the damage that these adjustments will cause them, and it's going to make your life a lot easier. An alternative form of knee protection would be knee pads. I personally don't use knee pads because they end up tearing up the back of my knees, but that might not be the case for you. So if you're considering different forms of knee protection, knee pads are a good way to go, and they're definitely worth looking into. Remember to make your adjustments based on what the level reads. If the block is not level, you need to pull that brick, add or take away gravel, make the adjustment needed. Then you need to reinstall that brick and check it again with that level until that brick is level, but not just with itself, but also with the bricks previous to it. They all have to be level with each other. One thing you guys need while installing these blocks are a good pair of landscaping or construction gloves. These bricks are sharp on the edges and they require a lot of force to make these adjustments. So you want to make sure to protect your hands with a good pair of gloves. Otherwise, if you're not using gloves, they're going to tear through your hands and you're going to cut yourself pretty bad and pretty easily. So one thing you want to do is get yourself a good pair of gloves, always when doing this. Now that your foundation row has been laid, now it's time to install your drainage system. Here we have a 3-inch corrugated sock pipe that's been perforated. Corrugated means that the shape of the pipe has elongated ridges in it for strength. Perforated means that this plastic pipe has slits in it so water can enter into the pipe and drain out the outlets. And the sock sleeve surrounding the outside of the pipe, this is to protect that pipe from getting clogged by contaminants. When you're installing your drainage pipe, use your gravel to install this pipe up against the backside of the foundation row. You're going to want to also use that gravel to slope this pipe towards the outlets to make sure that that water, once it enters the pipe, is going to drain properly to the outside outlets. Once you've properly installed your drainage pipe, backfill your wall and bury that pipe with your drainage rock. Here we've added a second course of retaining wall blocks to our foundation row, and now we're backfilling the retaining wall with drainage rock. As you guys are building your retaining wall, using multiple rows of blocks, make sure that you're compacting the drainage field behind the wall. About every 6 inches, you're going to want to compact the drainage field. So as you're backfilling the wall with drainage rock, make sure that you use a landscaping grading rake to rake out and grade that gravel nice and flat, and then run a compactor over it just like before when you were building your base. Make sure to use multiple passes when compacting your drainage field to make sure that it is completely compacted. One thing I would caution you guys about is stay away a couple inches from the backside of your retaining walls to make sure that you don't run this compactor into the backside of one of those bricks. If you do, it will break apart your wall and it will make it extremely difficult to repair the wall given the fact that there's all that drainage rock behind it. So do yourself a favor and stay away from the backside of those bricks by a couple inches. Now that our drain field is compacted, it's time to install the next course. But before we do that, we need to install GeoGrid into this wall. So what I'm doing is I'm taking a push broom and I'm sweeping off the retaining wall bricks, taking off sediment and small rocks from the surface area of the bricks. A good way to clean the surface area of these bricks is to have somebody with an air blower go and lightly blow the tops of these bricks, while somebody else is using a push broom to push a majority of those rocks off. If you guys work together using an air blower and a push broom, you'll get a great result and a nice clean base to work with. Now that the surface area of the bricks are clean, we can install the GeoGrid. Just like when we previously installed the geotextiles, we're stretching out our GeoGrid along the entire length of the wall, and we're preparing it so we can cut the appropriate width for this wall. Once you guys position the GeoGrid where it needs to be, take a pair of sharp scissors and cut that GeoGrid to the appropriate width. If you position the geogrid just right, you can use the wall as a guide for making the cut. This will ensure that your geogrid is cut straight and you can reuse the extra on a different section. Once your geogrid is cut, pull it back a couple of inches from the face of the wall blocks. You must keep the geogrid on the blocks themselves, but pull it back enough to where it's not sticking out of the front of the wall. Make sure to lay it all out evenly, taking out all creases and bends, and once you've done this step, you're now ready to install the next course. When you guys are installing your next course of retaining wall blocks, make sure the blocks are staggered with the course below. This is called interlocking your bricks. As you guys are installing the next course of retaining wall blocks onto the geogrid, it's imperative that that geogrid is stretched out and there's no crease or bends in it. The reason why is because the geogrid is literally on top of the bricks below. So when you add the additional block above it, if those bends or creases are in that geogrid, it's actually going to cause a bump in your brick, and you're going to see it on the next course and the course after that. So make sure that all the geogrid is as flat as you can get it to eliminate those bumps. The reason we're installing the geogrid into our retaining wall and drain field is because the geogrid serves as a stabilizer for the wall. When water enters into our drain field, it's going to create a lot of movement and activity in between the rock. So by having the geogrid installed in the rock in multiple layers, it's going to prevent that rock from shifting around when that activity and movement from the water exists. That's why we use it as a stabilizer. When you're installing your bricks, make sure you're using your mallet to ensure that there's no improper spacing in between your bricks and that your joints are as tight as you can get them. When building retaining walls, it's a good idea to consider working as a team. When you're working as a team, not only is it safer, but you can get the job done a lot more efficiently. If you watch this process, you will find that we are working very efficiently as a team. Here I am loading up the material into this piece of equipment, using the equipment to bring it to the installer. The installer is focused on getting the material and installing it right where it needs to go. Together, we are working so much faster than if all these responsibilities were put on one person. Not only would that one person be worn out, but it would get to the point where it becomes unsafe. That's why it's so crucial when you're doing these types of activities to work as a team. One thing to remember always when building retaining walls is to eat and hydrate. Throughout the build, you're essentially going to be weightlifting all day long, so you must remember to eat and hydrate. If you don't, what will happen is you're going to get weak and you're going to get hurt. All this material is extremely heavy. It can cause a lot of damage if you're not thinking clearly. So do yourself a favor, throughout the build, remember to eat and hydrate. Another thing to remember when building retaining walls is to pace yourself. You don't want to be going as fast as you possibly can. You want to be going as efficiently as you can. And sometimes going slower is actually a lot faster. So remember this, pace yourself. Now that the GeoGrid is installed, with another course on top of the GeoGrid, it's time to backfill the drainage field. Remember, when you're backfilling your retaining wall, you need to choose a good drainage rock. Contact your local rock material supplier and tell them specifically that you need drainage rock. They're going to tell you what your best options are, so make sure that you listen to them and choose something that's appropriate for the type of retaining wall that you guys are building. The type of drainage rock that we chose for this particular retaining wall is 3/4- clean crushed rock. The reason we chose this rock is because we're embedding a fence into the backside of this retaining wall, and so we need a good drainage rock that's also used for stability and foundation. Now that we're getting closer to the top of the wall, it's time to install these fence post sleeves. These fence post sleeves were designed and engineered so that we can install a fence directly behind this retaining wall. When building a fence directly behind a retaining wall, the fence itself will create a lateral surcharge on the retaining wall of up to 500 pounds per post due to elemental conditions such as rain and wind. In order to compensate or buffer for that lateral surcharge caused by the fence on the retaining wall, you need to either use specifically engineered fence post sleeves, such as the one in this film, or you need to distance your fence from the retaining wall at the appropriate distance. The distance should be a minimum of 3 feet, and depending on what type of fence you're building and the weight of that fence will determine the distance that you can safely build behind the retaining wall. If you guys are going to be incorporating fence post sleeves into your retaining wall builds, make sure you speak with the manufacturer of the fence post sleeves that you are in consideration of, and make sure they're going to work with your plans. Give them the details of your retaining wall, including all measurements, and they will be able to provide you with the proper installation methods required, as well as the correct material amounts needed for your build. Here we are setting our fence post sleeves according to the instructions provided by the manufacturer. We are using a level to make sure our fence post sleeves are completely level before backfilling. In addition, we are using some rock to set the sleeves and make sure that they are not going to move during the backfilling process. As we are setting the sleeves, we are using a hand tamper to lightly compact the sleeves so they are not loose and hold firmly as we install them. As you guys are installing your sleeves, you will need to make adjustments until you have the sleeves level and properly secure for when they are to be used for building the fence later in time. Spacing is imperative for the integrity of your build, so double check that you are properly spacing the sleeves and that no errors are being made. Once you have a properly installed sleeve, move on to the next one and follow the same process until they are all installed correctly. If you look at the yellow sticker on top of the fence post sleeve, this plastic top will be cut out when we are ready to install our fence. We will not cut the top down, but we will cut the top plastic piece out of the sleeve. Once this is complete, we will drop in our fence post down into the sleeve and pour concrete around the post in the sleeve. The sleeve will form the concrete, and we will then set our posts level and at the right height. The concrete will cure, and the post will then solidify into the sleeve. This step will be done after our retaining wall is built and completed, but not before. Use your level to determine where your adjustments should go. The sleeve must be level prior to backfilling, so use your level properly to make the correct adjustments before moving on to the next sleeve or preparing for the backfilling process. As we continue to work as a team to set these fence post sleeves correctly, we are also filling up our retaining wall blocks with gravel as we move down the wall. This way we are maximizing the use of our time, making our operation more efficient and organized. Now that your fence post sleeves are set, level, and you have enough gravel base on each of them, backfill the wall with drain rock to the top of your course. Make sure you compact the drain field, as demonstrated previously, as you backfill. Once you have reached the top of your course, you can continue to build your wall with another course of segmental retaining wall block. As you are installing your wall block, make sure that each block is as tight and snug as you can get them with each other. Do not leave small gaps in between the blocks, and make sure that the lips of the bricks are tight against the back of the blocks underneath. Use your mallet to make sure the blocks are as tight as you can get them with each other. Remember not to hit the blocks too hard with your mallet, as you may damage the concrete blocks by mistake. As you're building your next course, look down the course as you build, and go back and make any small adjustments that you need to make to the blocks if any of them should look out of place. These small corrections can make a big difference in the craftsmanship of your work. It is very important to sweep off the top of the blocks below before installing your next course above. This can be done with a small hand broom or by hand. Small rocks or any other solid objects that get stuck between the blocks will create an unstable block. This will cause an uneven surface for the next course that will continue to run to all the courses thereafter. These small deviations will cause a wall to not be level, so it is imperative to keep the blocks clean from any debris as you install them together. When working on a team, have one of the team members retrieve blocks and line them up for the installer. This way the installer will have the material on hand and will be able to dedicate their focus to installing the blocks correctly. This is another key aspect to working efficiently and maximizing the use of your time on the job site. If you watch this next block install, you will find that it slips forward as I try to install it. The reason the block did this is because the retaining lip is defective. As you install your wall, you will find that some blocks will not be usable. Set these blocks aside and return them to the manufacturer if it is found to have been defective. Some defective blocks include broken lips, uneven widths, cracked blocks, severe chips, etc. This is normal, and it's the responsibility of the installer to identify these blocks and not to use them. Work with your manufacturer, as they will most likely refund you for the defective blocks or replace them with usable ones. Now that we have completed our courses and have reached the height in which our wall will be built, which is 4 feet for this build, the next steps are to prepare for soil to be blown in so grass can be planted behind the wall. Before we can do that, however, we need to protect our drain rock from contamination. So we are wrapping our geotextile filter fabric that was installed behind the wall over the drain rock and pinned down into the drain rock on top using landscaping staples. The geotextile filter fabric that was used to protect the soil from entering into the drain field from behind the wall will also serve the same purpose on top of the drain field as well. This is what that looks like. Once your geotextile filter fabric is covering your drain field and is pinned down with landscaping staples, you have a couple of methods for backfilling your wall with soil for planting grass. The first method is to use a skid steer or wheelbarrows and drop piles evenly behind your wall. Hand grade the piles with a hard rake to rough grade and landscaping rakes to final grade. Once final graded, roll the soil evenly with a lawn roller and make adjustments to the soil as needed to eliminate any bumps. The second method is to use a blower truck and to have the material selected blown in. You will need to use a landscaping rake to final grade the soil. Once the soil is final graded, roll the soil evenly with a lawn roller and make adjustments as needed to eliminate any bumps. Both of these methods will work, but calculate which method is more cost-effective to keep your bids competitive and win more jobs. In this build, we chose to have the soil blown in as demonstrated in this film. As you can see, by blowing in the soil, we distribute the soil evenly using the blower hose, making the grading process less labor-intensive than dropping piles and then hand grading them with rakes. If you choose to use this method of having your soil blown in, make sure everyone involved with the process has hearing and eye protection. This will protect against someone getting hurt from the material entering into someone's eyes or ear canals. Our soil has now been blown in, and it's time to glue the capstones onto our wall. Here we are using Paverstone adhesive glue. These adhesives come in 10.3 and 20 ounce tubes. Get yourself a good caulking gun that fits the size of tube you have. The size of the job will determine the size of the tube you choose and how many of each you should use. The reason I like to get the bigger ones is that you get more glue for the price. Take your wall capstones and line them up next to the wall as shown. If working in a team, have somebody line them up as the installer glues to speed things up. This way, when the installer is done gluing the wall blocks, they can grab them quickly and install them onto the wall. You will also need to install the capstones shortly after you have set the glue so that the glue does not dry out and become unusable. Before you glue your wall block, make sure that the surface area of the wall block is clean and free of any debris. Use a broom or an air blower to accomplish this prep work. Because our block is hollow, we are going to draw a bead of glue around the perimeter of the surface area of the block. You want to make sure the glue stays away from the edges so it does not leak out the side and onto the face when the capstone is installed. If this wall block was not hollow and had a complete surface area, we would use either an S-shaped bead or an X-shaped bead. However, no matter what type of block you'd use, make sure you use enough glue in any application to secure a solid bond between the wall block and capstone. Remember that not all glue is the same, so be sure to follow all directions and guidelines for the type of glue you are using. Make sure that all conditions and application methods are being followed correctly before applying the adhesive to your wall. You must get a solid bond for the caps to be secure, and failure to do this can result in somebody getting hurt or damage to the wall in the future. Now that we have glued the wall blocks, we can install the capstones. We have our caps lined up and we will use our mallet to tap them into place securely on the wall. By tapping them into place, you are setting the glue and allowing the tightest fit between the block and the cap. As you are installing one cap after another, be sure that you are keeping your caps lined up and straight. If need be, use a string line to help guide your caps to where they need to be in order to be straight. The purpose of capstones is to deflect water off of the wall. Instead of water running directly into the wall and through the gravel that is packed between the blocks, the water will now be deflected off of the wall and into the drain field or front of the wall. The capstone works as a roofing system for the retaining wall and houses the blocks. In addition to the protection that capstones offer the wall, They are also used for a finishing product that are aesthetically pleasing to look at. Depending on the wall that you are building, you can get custom capstones of all types to create a significance of beauty for your wall. In this film, we are building a retaining wall in the backyard of someone's home, and a fence will be built in front of it. So the materials chosen for this project were specifically picked out for function rather than aesthetics. If this was a retaining wall that many people would see on a regular basis, we may have picked out materials that not only provided function, but artistic beauty as well. Remember that when you are designing your wall, to think about function and aesthetics to offer the most value to your client. This will help with your sales approach and also will help the client accomplish more with their landscaping goals. Remember, just like when we went back and made some adjustments as needed to the wall block as we were installing them, be sure to look down your wall and correct or make adjustments to any capstones you have set previously. For this, time is critical because you only have about 20 minutes before most paver adhesives start to bond. So as you work down your wall, installing the capstones, look back and correct anything before moving too far along. When it comes to the price of material, when dealing in function versus aesthetics, usually material that is aesthetically beautiful in looks is also more expensive. So keep in mind the most important part of landscaping or hardscaping work. That is function. First solve function, and then solve aesthetics. It does not matter how beautiful something is if it does not solve the function of what it is to be used for. As the project designer and builder, it is your responsibility to help your client receive the most value for their investment. And that is where your education comes into the equation. If your client picks out a material that you know will not meet the functional needs of what it is being used for, it is up to you to educate them appropriately and guide them to the correct material options for their goals. Now that we have our capstones glued and set, it is time to cut our corner capstones. This process involves cutting the capstones with a concrete wet saw. Before we can cut the capstones, we need to score our caps. Scoring means to mark them. You can use a sharp metal object, such as a large nail, screwdriver, or in this example, a metal flat bar to score the bricks. In order to get our scores for the corner caps, we need to trace to get the most accurate cuts. To do this, you will need to install the surrounding caps other than where your cut caps need to go. You will then overlap the capstones that need to be cut on top of the installed caps as shown. You will then score the block from the bottom of the cap. Drag your tool along both edges of the installed caps and into the block above. This will mark where your cuts need to be. Take a straight edge after you have your score marks and deepen the marks. Score the straight edge along where the cuts need to be to deepen the scores so you can see them more clearly. Once you have your marks, you are ready to cut your corner caps. Take your brick with the scores and face the scores to the saw blade. Line up the scores with the saw blade and prepare to cut using the wet saw. When using a concrete wet saw, make sure to use eye and hearing protection. The concrete bricks can shoot off particles that can become lodged in your eyes, which can cause severe injury, if not blind you. The noise from the saw cutting through the concrete bricks can also cause temporary or permanent hearing loss if exposed long enough. So it is imperative to wear the appropriate personal protective equipment when operating this tool. You can also wear a mask to protect your breathing, but beware that a mask can fog up your eye protection, which can make it even more dangerous to operate this machine. So use your own judgment for making that decision for yourself. Remember, you are using a saw that can cut through stone. If it can cut through stone, imagine what else it can cut through. So exercise extreme caution when using this tool. Here we have an example of what our scores should look like. This brick demonstrates what proper score marks should look like before cutting on a wet saw. One thing that I want to mention that is very important while doing this work: have fun. Have fun while you're working. Enjoy what you are creating and be thankful for all the wonderful things in life that has allowed you to be able to build. When you are happy at work, you will perform and build better. So have fun and take some time to laugh, breathe, and let go of stress. Life is too short, so always make the most of it. Remember, one step at a time. Once your caps are cut, install them just like the other caps. Prepare your surface area, glue, and install with your mallet. Congratulations! You have successfully learned the process and key fundamentals on how to build a retaining wall. Here is our completed retaining wall product. I want to thank you for your participation in learning with All-Phase Landscaping and Design. You are now equipped with the proper knowledge to go out and practice or improve on your own retaining wall builds. From all of us here at All-Phase Landscaping and Design, thank you, and we wish you nothing but success in all your future endeavors.